Jaret Grossman is a life coach who really loves to help people and find their purpose and grow mentally and emotionally, which is why he was a perfect expert to have on the podcast. While Jaret didn't necessarily go through the loss of a child, he certainly has a bunch of insight that we could really pull a lot from. One thing I can tell you is that Jaret is an intense individual, and if you listen to his Muscle Prodigy Alpha album, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So sit back, relax, and listen to this intense individual talk about how we can get unstuck as dads who have lost a child. I hope you enjoy. And we are live with Jaret Grossman. Jaret, thanks for coming on the podcast today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle.
So let's really jump right into it. Your message, and talk a little bit about your message. It's insanely motivating. So where did all of it begin? What's your story behind your message?
Oh, I appreciate that greatly. We all go through trials, tribulations, challenges, so forth, and it was no different with me. I told my story, hundreds of times in terms of growing up. I had a great, childhood in terms of loving family and so forth. But I guess, peers getting along with, friends at school, not always as easy. That was a challenge for me. And I got picked on and bullied a little bit, didn't have that many friends and so forth. And then, eventually just learned a lot about life through the weight room, through wrestling and so forth. Just really learned about work ethic and was able to make something out of myself there. And then naturally respect follows from there in a way. It's funny how that works, but really applied myself, became a 3-time All-American wrestler. And, that was really a jump start for me to be able to understand how hard work transcends and you reap the rewards from it.
And you've got a lot of content out. There's a lot of people that talk about your YouTube videos, and they're fairly quick videos, but just really, really motivating. What's if you could kind of summarize all the stuff that you've got out there right now for guys, because it's a lot of different kinds of, like self-help type things, but on a very motivating and very like alpha male style of delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been an intense individual throughout certain phases of my life for sure, and then life sort of course corrects you in a way, but to come back to center in a little bit. But, my quest is just to live as happy, a fulfilling life as possible, to, meet my inner goals and ambitions, desires. I think that most people fall in that category. And so it's just a quest for personal growth, maximizing who you are, and just really emanating out from that ethos.
And when you talk about that growth, there's a lot of guys who listen to podcasts and a lot of guys' wives who listen to this podcast and then kind of do the game of telephone over to their husbands. These guys have all been through some sort of a tragedy where they've lost a child or they've lost a loved one, and there's a lot of potential for growth that I think comes at that moment that some people don't ever have the opportunity for. What kind of transferable skills do you see for, people that you work with and people that you talk to that can help guys like that are experienced that, like, they have that potential, but what's like the next step for them, would you say?
Yeah. So, anybody who's gone through, tremendous heartache, tragedies, heartbreak, like you're talking about, my condolences. We can't control all the events in life, obviously. It's just, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for why things happen. And we try to wrap our brain around exactly why. We try to get this, real closed off box in terms of why, like to give us that sense of calm or comfort. And sometimes it just never comes when you keep analyzing it. So it's just a matter of, understanding that it was for a higher purpose, for whatever it is. That's a matter of faith, belief. And just, you do have to do some digging in terms of what if there was something you could have done, better in the past, or, perhaps it's just teaching you life lessons for the future or so forth. It molds you, it shapes you into who you ultimately want to be. There's all different kinds of, analysis in terms of, what exactly you could do. But The main thing is how you respond ultimately, and how you take control of your mind and not let your past define you, and obviously not get stuck in a rut where you're not going to make something out of yourself. So it's again, people talk about the victim mentality or so forth. You don't want to get caught up in that. Just thinking that you have no effect to the world. That your situation can't be deterred or changed or whatever it is. You don't have free will or choice. You do have free will or choice, and that's the main fundamental principle that needs to live within you, and you just got to keep moving forward. That's it. Life hits us down, and you got to just get back up.
Yeah. And how I guess how I came across Jaret was through the Muscle Prodigy Alpha album, and we were talking before the podcast. I used to listen to it a lot when I was working out, and it, just as with this message, very, very motivating. Really get you pumped up. After I went through the loss of my son and listening to it over and over again, then I started really listening to the words, and then. Jaret, there was a lot of things you were saying right there that were in one of my favorite tracks, which is "Test of Life." Do you have a story behind that track or any of the other tracks on the album? With do any of them really mean more to you than the rest, or is there anything that really pertains to you that you can kind of share with us?
Oh, yeah, sure. First off, yeah, Kyle, I want to say, my deepest condolences. Sorry, for everything that you've had to go through from that. I mean, it's just, tragedies are a horrible thing, obviously, and sometimes we can't wrap our head around it. But yeah, in terms of my albums and tracks and motivational speeches that I put out, I mean, a lot of it, we're just, we're subconsciously drawn to certain things. I think just that basically you were summing it up, that you were drawn to certain tracks of mine, but then eventually, the conscious awareness starts developing a little more. You start digging deeper into the words, so forth. That's sort of the same thing, believe it or not, with speeches. A lot of the stuff, sort of, comes out, and then you reflect back, and then you really analyze and you say, wow, that there was a lot more conscious awareness that elevates you to understand it. But a lot of it's just been shaped from my personal experiences. Do I have any bias in terms of what tracks I like better? I guess some, but I like the motivation pump up stuff too, and I like to get a little deeper than most people in this space do in terms of going deep and staying there.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, like, you listen to yourself, and then, Eric Thomas, you listen to a little bit of him too. I'm sure you're familiar with him. But your stuff, I think I definitely, I would have to say I definitely favor, the Muscle Prodigy one's always kind of my go-to one. So, what do you, for people who are stuck, going back to that rut thing, because some people have, there's an idea, a business idea, or there's, like a hobby or something that they want to run with, and, and they're not sure how to jump into it. And that's kind of one realm of people. But there's some people who can get stuck and they don't know what direction to go. Where should they start looking? Should they start looking at certain hobbies? I mean, is starting a business or jumping into, some sort of, what kind of projects should people be looking to when they're stuck in that rut?
I think the compass has got to be towards your, what's going to help you grow, to the best version of yourself, as cliche as that is. There's probably certain areas that are lagging or weakening, whether it's spiritually, whether it's financially, whether it's familial, relationships, looking for your true love, so forth. Wherever that void is, you need to sort of fill that void. So it could be with financially, you need to start a side business to pull in some more income or another job. It could be, relationships. It's time to get into one if you're caught alone, and really look for your soulmate, your true love, and you got to get back out there or whatever it is. Or it could be, your physical fitness isn't where it should be. You got to get into the gym and start something. So the hobby really should be based on where the void is and try to fill it as best as possible, because it's just going to get worse and worse, and it'll nag at you. And the more you evade the truth, the more it's going to come back to haunt you down the road, like anything else in life.
Yeah. And it certainly makes sense. There's a lot of guys, a lot of our listeners have that void, and it can be kind of hard to find that why sometimes, and what to really fill that void with. But yeah, I can echo the same thing. I totally agree that, starting with the weakness really seems to be, or, starting with the weakness, the void is a great way, not only to, get yourself out of that rut, but also to, kind of distract you from the void itself or whatever had caused the void. It certainly seems like that would be a great way to, just jump in and keep going with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people out there that, they might listen to your message, Jaret, and, you've got people like myself who listen to you, but you've got other people that, I guess to take a step back, I think one fear that people have to get out of the void is, what are other people going to think? And I'm sure you have your haters and the people who, judge you. I mean, you got a lot of YouTube content, which means that some of those are the most vile of comments that people can leave on YouTube alone, because I think that's where it started. How do you address that? Or how do you, I guess, not listen to it, or how do you handle it? Stuff like that, if that's like a barrier for people.
Fear of the unknown, but what you're specifically bringing up is, fear of what other people will say, judgments and so forth. So, if the truth is for you to go in this direction, the hobby of your calling, so to speak, at this stage of your life, where you have to share words of wisdom or whatever it is, if you're getting prevented by something else that's not of truth, you're disrespecting the universe's natural laws in that sense, because of you're trying to stroke your ego, essentially, which is, your ego can be confined to this thing of, well, I want to be liked or respected. Those are great things, and those are needs at certain stages of your life, but there will probably be, some other stages of your life that are going to demand for different things. And it's actually to shed the ego and in the face of truth. So if you're denying that, then you can't evade the natural laws of the universe. It's only going to catch up to you, get worse and worse if you don't listen to this thing and do it. So there will have to be a time where you step up to the challenge and you go forward. And, in the beginning, the fears are very strong with certain things. I think it's more of a test, and you got to just sort of break it down, saying that I'm willing to fight for truth. And at that point, you'll notice how you get rewards in the beginning, and then sort of the rewards. It's weird how it works. It sort of fades a little bit. And again, not to get too deep, but again, it's a test to see if you'll do it without reward. And then, eventually the rewards will come again.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring up the ego part of it. I guess I never really would have thought of that. One of our previous guests talked about, how ego plays a big role in the grief game, where, guys particularly will, they won't grieve because of their ego. They want to be the strong one, the guys don't cry kind of thing. But it's interesting that ego can also be a barrier on the other end too, where, I guess I never really thought of it being the one that could get you, you're stuck in the rut.
Yeah. Great point, Carl. So yeah, we often think that we as men are weak if we show signs of submission, right? Submitting. But at certain points, you're going to have to show toughness, and grit and so forth, not give up. That mentality won't always serve you, though. There will be another point in your life where your strength will actually be in submitting. That will be another level that you will have to tackle, which is I'm willing to give in, essentially, and you will have to give up on certain things. That's strength in and of itself, Yeah.
Yeah. And it certainly, it almost seems like, once you you learn how to manage that ego and manage that, that when to submit, when not to. It's almost like another level of enlightenment.
Oh,
and I think there's a lot of, again, transferable, like not tragedy, but transferable, like things that people go through where, if they fail in a business, if they lose a loved one, there's that, oh crap, like what do I got to do from here? How do I manage my ego around this? Like, do I cut it off? Do I submit and say, okay? But then there's also that, okay, I've gone through this loss. Like entrepreneurship is another big thing that you talk about. And what is it? What percentage of entrepreneurs fail at like 90% of their business or something like that? It's something crazy with entrepreneurs. But then, you fail, then you hit some sort of path of enlightenment, or you hit some idea and you run with it. And it actually, like you said, there'll be success, there'll be some reward, and, it can ebb and flow too.
I agree.
Jaret, one of the other videos that I really liked and I try to use in my own, I guess in my own regular day. You were sitting on the bleachers and you're talking about the bleachers you used to run in school. Yeah. And you had practice, but you'd run the bleachers beforehand, you'd run them afterwards. And I think that's kind of like what some of the guys have to go through to get through what they're going through now. I think most people go through the regular day. It's like their practice. But for you, can you kind of tell that story? I really like that story, and I'd like for you to share that one if you can.
Yeah, sure. So I had a amazing mentor that came into my life at a really young age. I was in high school wrestling, and this guy was on the Olympic ladder team in his day and wrestled in college and so forth. And he, was just had an amazing mindset, and he took a few of us under his wing, and I just really gravitated towards him. And he just taught me a lot about life and especially, the idea of work ethic. He something that he said that will always stick with me is basically that, everybody in not only this high school, but throughout every high school, throughout, the county and the state that you're looking to go into the state championships and the nation, they all have practice. It's scheduled, right? And it's probably going to be a 2-hour practice. They're probably going to be doing the exact same drills that you're doing, right? So he said, you going to practice, you showing up, and if you go 6 days a week, whatever it is, you're just at par. You're par for the course. So there has to be some different input in order for there to be a different output. So that means doing extra work outside, not with your mind, with your body, watching up on, tape and videos and stuff like that, and studying the craft on your own time, but also physical work, so doubling up on practices and doing conditioning and sprints and weight training and so forth, and nutrition. And if you get all those pieces right, and now you've really separated yourself, So I used to go to the bleachers, as you mentioned, with my mentor, and we would just run sprints nonstop for about, close to 45 minutes an hour before school, a few days a week. And that really just separated me from like a conditioning standpoint, especially in wrestling, So forever grateful for those experiences. And I did a video that was sort of like a nostalgic moment for me, where I looked back and it helped me reflect on current moments, that you always have an extra gear, and you can't just expect great results sometimes if you're just, staying par for the course with what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up that extra gear part, because I think that, just the human potential, whether it be, training, whether it be grief, whatever the case may be, it's almost like as humans, we always have that extra gear. And then when you talk about separating yourself out, I think there's a lot of watchful eyes, particularly in guys in our situation, where there's a lot of eyes on you, especially when you go back to work, when you get back in your social circles and everything. People are going to kind of watch to see what's going to happen with you next. And if you're performing like what you're talking about, you're doing the bleachers metaphorically, like if you're doing the bleachers before practice, in life and going to practice and then doing the bleachers after and doing the additional training, the additional nutrition. It doesn't have to be like the physical training part of it. I mean, it could be whatever you're doing, and then you're leveling up and you're really separating yourself out. I mean, you have an audience, which is sometimes that helps having people watch you. But other times, then you get to a point where I think you stop caring what anybody thinks, if anybody's even watching at any point in time. Again, I'm starting to, I think, talking to some of the lyrics of one of the other tracks on your album, but and I'm preaching right to the choir at this point, I think, but.
And mentioning, that's gold. But it's not so easy to do. Not even for me, for anybody. We are result driven and so forth. We're looking for rewards and we want to see if something works and so forth. So it's tougher to do than in practice. But you're absolutely right. With really successful people, what they do get to a point where they focus on their craft. But I think it's mainly what your purpose is and your calling and so forth, what you're meant to do. You're going to have the energy to do it. It's what you're made for. So if that's what you're made for, the energy has to come from somewhere, right? So that's just a great philosophy, belief to have, that there's always something inside you that could bring it if that's what you're meant to do at that moment in time.
Yeah. And then, I guess before we talked on the podcast here, I couldn't remember the name of the track of the other song. It was Frame of Reference was the other one. And I think one of my favorite lines from that whole thing was that the scars remind me that I'm still here. And man, I like I said, I was listening to this before everything happened, and I remember hearing that track over and over and over again, and do not go gently into that dark night. And I would get amped up hearing that. and we go back to now you get to another level of, consciousness, fast forward quite a few months, and you hear that and you're like, all right, I'm still here. And that's, and I think that was one of the main things that when I heard that and Test of Life, I wanted to reach out to you and bring you on, because your message, while it always seems such hardcore training, there's so much more to life that people can get out of just listening to some of these tracks, all of these tracks. I'd say listen to the whole damn album, because it can pertain to your whole damn day, really.
Jared, in some of those tracks, like they're 2-3 minutes, some are 5 minutes or so forth, with the speeches that I do, I try to, especially the ones that I put a lot of thought into, that are like with pump up music, not where I'm talking in front of a camera. That's more a little off the cuff, with some like 365 series. But with those audio tracks, I try to condense as much as I learned throughout life into so I listen to, a lot of the stuff over and over again just to, reflect on my life and gain wisdom. And it's funny, when you listen to it, 6 months, a year, a couple of years down the road, you pick up different things. It's wild how that works.
Yeah, you start applying it to different things. I mean, you may have been training for a triathlon, months ago, and you're listening to it, and then, then you're going through something crazy in your life, and you're listening to it again. You're like, holy shit, that still applies. It's just, I got to do something a little different, but I'm just as motivated to do this as I was to do that. So yeah, it definitely, and I just keep hammering at this. It's insanely helpful to listen to.
Awesome.
Jaret, I do want to be as respectful of your time as possible. So I want to get one last question by is, what's one piece of advice you can give to our listeners, who you kind of know the guys who are going to be listening to this podcast. What's one piece of advice you can give to them to just kind of to get started here?
Yeah, for sure. So back to what we were talking about, the compass has to be the happiness blueprint. What is the formula for happiness? It's going to be slightly different for everybody, but there's a few main things that we got to all get right, which is just basically we got to do very well financially, obviously, because it just increases our options and decreases our stress. Certainly, that's a major thing. Obviously, our family relationships, or at least somebody, people that you care about, who care about you. You have to have that. But obviously, finding your true love, your soulmate, you have to believe that they're out there, that perfect match for you, for instance. And if you found them, I applaud you and commend you. And now it's just a matter of keeping it and growing it and sustaining it. And obviously, we got to feel like we're contributing on a daily basis to society, but doing mainly through our work, meaningful work that we're doing on a daily basis. And we're always willing to work, that's really important. And just growing spiritually. So, if those, really main pillars are taken care of, sort of all the other stuff is sort of just keep it in perspective that it's gravy. Don't get caught up. Don't get too high, too low. Don't get caught up in the little, minutiae or things. And obviously, if you're going through a tough time, everybody's situation is very circumstantial and different. There's a lot of context, so I can't just give sort of a one size fits all kind of speech to basically sum it all.
Oh, yeah, no, and understandable.
Yeah, just keep moving forward. That's the main thing, and obviously, take some time to reflect. There's nothing that when somebody goes through tragedy, for instance, there's nothing that anybody can say that can sort of cope or relate, but sometimes, there are a few words of wisdom or golden nuggets that you can take from it to sort of give you hope and light again, and just find meaning in what happened, and that's the important thing.
Gotcha. Now, Jaret, what's the best way for guys if they they're listening right now and they want to get a hold of you with the consulting and things that you do, or see or get to some of your material? What's the best way to do all that?
Yeah, on my website, jaretgrossman.com, JaretGrossman.com. I wrote a book called Cracking the Code. I've got several video courses. I'm going to be putting more up. And obviously, I do one-on-one coaching. That's really my bread and butter. So a coaching call that you could book, or a full immersion where I actually fly out for a couple of days. And that's really where the biggest breakthroughs are, because I get to really meet you face to face in person. We get to go through your entire life over the course of a couple of full days, doing activities together and so forth, and just, talking through things. So would love to come out.
Nice. Very good. Yeah. And I mean, even just in listening to the album YouTube videos, it's helped me tremendously. So I can only imagine, like, especially this full immersion, how much that can really just turn your life around in a couple of days. So I could definitely see how that would be a huge, huge help for guys. So, well, Jaret, man,
especially if you're stuck, then you got to get something to shake you out of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but Jaret, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's a little different message than we usually share on this podcast. But again, this is something that kind of came to me in the gym one day, and I was like, I need to have him on here. I'm going to reach out and just see what happens. And you responded within minutes of me emailing. So if that gives you any testament to, Jaret's willingness to help anybody and get them unstuck, that speaks volumes to it. So, well, Jaret, thank you very much for coming on, and I do appreciate it, sir.
Hey, I appreciate you, Kyle. Thanks so much, man. And keep doing great things. This is awesome.
Thank you. You too.